Can you ask
water.
for a
Okay.
bottle of water? A bottle of water?
Right.
He's
Yeah,
legit
give me a
nice at
bottle
water.
of
He's
water.
So
legit. Yeah, he's
A
legit.
bottle of water.
It is
Who the fuck's
o'clock,
this water?
so I am going
British
to
people.
try and
Ugh.
begin.
What?
We will see how
What
this
is
goes.
happening?
Okay, so for those who were just joining and missed a little bit of preamble, hi, I'm Mika. I have a good few hundred hours on this game at this point. I've been, before the NDA drop, we had this thing called a Hall of Fame. I've been on there a few times. I've been various high ranks for various different playtests when they've had ranked on. I'm not by any means the top of top players. There are some here even that are probably a little bit above me, but for what we're going to be doing today, I think I should be able to suffice in terms of bringing people in that more sort of intermediate level where you know the basic mechanics but not quite what people are doing with regards to setting up teams and squadding up and knowing what to really prioritize just as a group. So this is kind of the things to figure out of game so that you all know what you're doing when you're heading in. So yeah, I think we'll begin.
I have a question about the game.
Go ahead.
The game is gonna have a chat system or a voice chat system.
There is voice chat
Sorry,
in game, yes.
I want to say sorry if you don't understand me because I am
No. I
not
understand you
an
perfectly
English. Oh, thank you. I'm kinda.
But yes, there will be voice chat in game. There will be text chat in game.
Mhm.
It works in solo queue. It works in team queue. You can also use Discord. I know many people prefer Discord. Communication shouldn't be an issue there. Right.
Yeah, thank you.
So, a few.
No protections against Australian voice chat yet, though. We're working on that.
Oh no.
Yeah, where's the Australian servers? That was my quick quizzy.
A few quick disclaimers. So, this being a free-for-all game, not only can you not replicate everything perfectly every time, your opponents will also not be playing perfectly every time. The result of this is sometimes we get outcomes where we've done quote-unquote a good play that isn't probably going to be good. Classic example is when, sorry to random solo queuers, they randomly decide to third party you in a fight they shouldn't be in the first place because they will immediately get wiped by the team right next to whoever they're third partying. And I'm not taking that personally because an IGN reviewer did it to me on a video that was then uploaded. Anyway, so yeah, I think with that out the way, we'll just move into kind of these ideas. So as I've stated before, this is going to be mostly just going over that phase of being a team where you've known the basics of like, I main this character, I main this character, I main this character, I main this character. You don't necessarily know how you're going to play as a result of that. So first bit, and I want to shout out Qualifier specifically for the wording here, because this is a much clearer way than what I had before. There are two main ways you can start, and they're kind of two ends of the same pipeline in that the good stuff's kind of in the middle. You can either start with kind of vibes and sort of playing to your emotions as a player, which is good because psychologically that means you're already in tune. You already think how that strategy is going to play out, in that you can be aggressive as a player, and that represents you being aggressive as a comp. You can also try and be more logical, and that's more writing down on paper sort of what you're about and then deciding to improve yourself as a player so that you can be more towards that play style. Neither's really correct per se. They both have their sort of strengths and weaknesses, and it's more like it can be seen as like brawn and brains and that kind of thing, but I think ultimately the best players will eventually have both. But I'm sort of building this guide on the assumption that none of us are there yet, not even myself. So, you've had a little chance to be reading those of you at full screen, but those on mobile right now, or those who don't really multitask between listening and reading, which is fair enough, you can either start with Team Vibes, and Team Vibes will be what you're comfortable playing already. When you're confident as your power spikes, as opposed to when you have material advantages. This can be really good with the right kind of morale-based player, of like, look how much we've snowballed, or go, 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 and that kind of thing. For those more veteran around here, I think the classic example I'd point to is someone like a Weedle. Those are your best kind of Team Vibes groups, I would say. Team Maths, on the other hand, sort of, you're not necessarily picking comfort, you're just picking, here's people that like work well together with whoever our carriers, or whoever's more like a player we need to give a little bit of leeway. So you don't have to go full comfort but across the board, but usually a good starting point if you're going to be building synergy anyway is look at one individual player that's going to be the cohesive knot, as it were. And then, yeah, the outcome of this also means that because Team Vibes has more emotion to play off, in that they're feeling this confidence, they're feeling these fights more, you're naturally going to come out in terms of LP, or I think it's called RR in this game, I don't remember the abbreviation. If you're playing ranked, that means that kills are going to be your main priority, getting high kill counts and whatnot, which does give LP. Placement, on the other hand, is sort of, it's about half and half of your LP, and Team Maths, by the nature of them sort of being more reasonable and sort of assessing, is likely to have less Blaze of Glories, but more like, well, sometimes you need that blaze to burn down the lobby, if I were to summarize it. Okay, any questions thus far?
Yeah, I can't see the fucking stream at all. Is there some way to make it so we can see, more people can see the stream, or what's going on here?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
actually.
it's limited to 50 people, so I don't know.
Oh
me.
shit! Right.
Wait.
Yeah,
I'll
I was
stop
hearing you harp on about that, and I was wondering what you're talking about, because I can't really see it.
Suffering from success. Okay.
Worst case, you can send it to me and I can also stream it.
That is a good point. Yeah.
I could stream the stream.
Genius!
That is
Get
a
on
good
it, mate!
point.
Get on it!
Daisy chain streams together.
I mean, it's dumb, but I've got Nitro and good internet, so it should work.
It's,
Go ahead.
I'm gonna have to turn off the stream volume so I don't hear myself. My lovely voice.
Chat.
Right, I'm gonna go through some questions from chat. In which case, while we're waiting for type on that slide. Yeah, that's possible. I did sprint into him, yes, but I was sprinting away from someone else at the same time. Thank you. Yeah, I'll assume we're sort of good to go if I'm not hearing too many vocal questions. Yeah, okay.
Are there any other teams other than Vibes or Maths or what?
So I'll be honest, eventually Team Vibes and Team Maths are kind of the same team, but that's what we're gonna kind of frame as like your main question. I think this is the best first question to be asking as a team. Right. So I had written this when it was going to be more in joke as a community. So now that we're a bit more public, I sort of apologize, but I don't at the same time. Right. So basically, you're going to start with, as a principle for most fighting, and this is why we're sort of going to get this out of the way first. Your first most valuable resources are the things that run out and don't come back. So the ultimate goal in most fights, in what we call sort of a skirmish, is to kind of get these things to burn. However, there's sort of shorter skirmishes where button checking people, as it were, can kind of be beneficial in itself because cooldowns are a thing and they are present. So we're going to start there, and then we're going to sort of wait for a cooldown advantage where perhaps you can kind of force an ult, or say you've got, for example, a kingpin hook, which is 20 seconds, and you use it to burn a power. A power can sometimes...
Hey, yo, can we mute that guy? What the fuck?
Fair point, yeah. I will apologise that I've got the global volume of other people lower right now, so if anyone seems loud, call it out and we can sort of address that, because...
Heck, why or whatever. Oh, I think they're gone.
Right, so...
Sorry.
Continuing on, this is sort of your main loop of you're trying to get to a bottom of a stack of cooldowns where you can have things that trade 1-to-1, or you can have things that trade multiple, but you're sort of looking for the checkmate where they have no more cooldowns remaining. This is especially prevalent on protectors who have direct heals, and consumables are the only other option when they've run out of, for example, mana and that kind of thing. So you sort of go through this loop a lot, and what I want to kind of get across for perhaps fighting game players and other things like that, if you can get a reaction where it's like this cooldown forces them to use this thing, and this thing comes back faster than that thing, you've made more progress into the stack, which is going to get you closer to forcing consumables next, which means that until you've closed out like an entire fight, these are the good things you're looking for. Sometimes players will just blunder anyway, and that will mean you can just clean straight up. But if you're stuck in the phase of just kind of scouting each other out, or like you sort of look at each other front to back, and we'll get to front to back in a moment, this is kind of your main sticking point, really. I do have one exception for double controller, and this is kind of a meta thing right now, but it's such like a specific meta thing that I would be kind of amiss not to bring it up. And that is that since controllers have better access to a resource that's ultimately better than just simple cooldowns, and that is space itself, because this being a battle royale, you have closing rings and whatnot. In that space will become a diminishing resource. And since these characters control that specifically, that is kind of your best starting point. So sometimes it's okay to burn these, and I wouldn't be too worried about it if you have two controllers specifically, because if you have one controller and you burn your main like space claiming tool, then the other team knows you've just burnt your space taking tool. Whereas if you've got two sort of in rotation, it's much harder for their shot caller to keep track. And we'll get to shot callers also. I'm going to use this slide as a bit of a break slide to catch up on questions as I go. Right. I don't see many specific questions, but if people have them and what I'm just covering, because I know some of this probably will fly over the heads in that I've not got the exact discussion format down. Then I'm going to take some pause for that.
Sorry to interrupt you. Title text here, can you mute yourself? Like, we hear everything you're doing. Thank you. Sorry.
Anyways, thanks for calling out. I'll just answer for, I don't know if pins in this chat, but I do see I've been pinged in playtester chat. I will be recording. I've got OBS open right now. And if I'm not recording, I'll probably just re-record, and then I will take into account the questions that are being asked right now as well. So you'll probably get an editorialized version as the plan B if this recording fails for any reason.
Yeah,
I'll just scroll up.
I'd like to ask questions, but I don't really know that much about the game, so I don't really know what to ask, to be honest. I don't know.
That's
not a lot to...
fine. You also don't have to keep answering, keep like asking. You can lurk. That's also fine. Right. Propeller Rat asks, wouldn't Team Vibe and Team Math also differentiate by how they play the character? Like, one just goes for coolness and the other goes for things they labbed. That is another quantifying factor, but I also wouldn't consider it to be the only factor in sort of picking. So you can kind of like start with this character looks cool, and that's valid. If that means that you're going to invest enough hours in that, eventually it's equivalent to the experience you would have got from labbing. Whereas if you've picked a character just for the fact you've labbed it and you think it's good on that basis, then you also arrive at the same outcome. So vibes and maths, I will say, are kind of two sides of the same coin in that they're different approaches, but you get to the same thing. I'm hearing static and clicking from my mic. If people would just like to check, they would. Thank you.
How about everyone just mutes their mic, and if they have something to say, they unmute, question mark? Sorry to interrupt again.
No. That's a fair point. I didn't want to make too fine a point of it. I'm trying to be like good cop, because I know there's several mods in here. And I'm kind of hoping that there will be some like backup.
Yeah. I'm trying to make sure people are trying it. But
yeah. It's all good. Right. So this is probably going to be the most controversial bit of the slides. I will say it straight up. We're going to take the fighter role that we currently have in game, and we're going to split it a little bit. Now, this isn't to say that these make for any forms of definitive comps, but it's probably best in terms of I played this thing, and then if you, as for example, a Team Maths team, are like, okay, this is good, but I want to find someone who synergizes with it more. This sort of allows for sideways movement in that you can kind of see from the role types and their playstyle. And if you're a Vibes team, this is more sort of advice on who to pick next if someone's not really doing it for you. So we'll kind of go with that. As you can see, this is, unironically, I believe, the majority of the roster right now in one class, which does not help us. There are some games where it's like, it's legitimately fair to say the majority of the roster can kind of go into one thing. I don't think SUPERVIVE in the long term is one of them, which is why for now, and this will probably change as the game develops and so forth, but for now, in the meta we're currently in, I say meta, more so just patch, I've split characters into 3 kind of win cons that they have as like their specific thing, with the exception of duelists, where duelists kind of enjoy the status quo I've just explained with the consumable button timing loop. You're going to kind of want to consider, if you're on one of these, for example, my mouse cursor doesn't show in Discord, does it? Yeah, that's fine. For Harbingers, for example, so you've got characters like Jewel and Felix who have like their big sort of burst moments where they proc their marks on someone, and that kind of is their main kill move. And then I've paired it with someone like Shrike, for example, because it is the same game feel to it, and therefore same team vibes is going to be happy switching between these. And as for Team Maths, it works out the same way, where what it's going to do in reality is put pressure on whoever your target is. This sort of goes down the line to Assassins. Assassins I probably need to explain less, because this probably comes from other games more, or is more direct to those other games. you're basically trying to get into the back line. You're doing everything in your power to slip past sort of the main sort of defenses, and we'll get to formation in a moment, but front and back line, there is a lot of nuance to in time. Duelists, finally, they're like, as I was saying before, just the main feedback loop of trying to keep in that position. So Kingpin is going to be, for example, using his main button and cooldown hook. You've got Huntress, for example, who has, you can technically consider a defensive ability depending on the situation, going back through walls and stuff to escape, but her main thing is just the fact that she has an M1 that keeps the neutral, and because the M1 has charge up, I kind of consider it in the same CBT loop of you're just going to be firing up your left click, and that's about, Huntress mains can be specific if they want, but it's about 2 or 3 seconds from memory. Ghost, you're kind of doing the same thing with his E, but his E has an actual cooldown, like you can look at it, it's a cooldown. And yeah, that's about as far as we're going to get on that subject. Is a CBT... Yeah, so CBT, if I go back, we'll go back a bit, just to... Now before this. So, consumables buttons time of you're trying to trade things that are at the top of the loop, being consumables, buttons below it, because button for button should be kind of your goal. It's going to be bad disproportionately if, even if they've got a longer cooldown for their thing, they've used several of your things. And then below that, in the event that all of those are equal, you just kind of decide who quote-unquote won that trade based off the time it takes for those things to come back. Which...
For context, what's like an average, like, how long are cooldowns of abilities?
So,
like, on average, I get that. But are we talking like 5 seconds or like 25 seconds?
So we're probably looking at closer to, depending on how impactful the ability is, some of them are like 10, some of them like 20. I know some ultimates are really long, especially, for example, Celeste has like a really influential ultimate that's basically sort of a mix of Nunu ult and Mei Ice Block, in that she's invulnerable while she's doing it. Yes, I will be recording the discussion on OBS, and I'll be re-uploading. Yeah, it's pretty much Lysandra ult, except she also isn't stuck to the ground when she's doing it, so she can fling herself at you, and it's kind of like a diva bomb. Right, any further questions on these concepts before I move on? I'm trying to keep up.
Sorry, I'm late. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
And how long have you gone through? I'm kind of late.
So we've gone for about 20 minutes, but we're slowing down here and there on the concepts. So I reckon towards the end, we'll be jumping back more, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Right, okay. Where are we? So we've just gone through this, and that leads me to the summary of, at a basic eye level, and I'll probably just like upload screenshots of this after so people have it as a cheat sheet if they want to. But if you're an enemy squad and you're trying to look at like what the team probably does at a glance, these are probably the best summaries I could give. And yeah, for those who perhaps are on mobile and can't read the text, I'll just read some of them out loud. Controllers are your main kind of space creators. In the best case scenarios, they can cause a full-on disengage, but even sort of through fairly mediocre play, well, I say mediocre, more like their sort of baseline of value is going to create room, but their max range of value can completely end the fight. Not in a you've killed them kind of a way, but you force them to run away. Harbingers are going to mark a target their kits create a mark on somebody, and whoever that mark is, you should probably be paying attention to, because depending on the Harbinger, that means they're going to get either dived or directly shot at, if not body blocked, in ways that will just kill them. Doesn't really matter if they're like... We don't have any meaningful, quote-unquote, hard tanks that can just shrug off Harbingers as of yet. That may change the design of the game over time, I can't say. As for assassins, moving sort of onto that, you've got your direct, sort of classic, get into the backline. For Overwatch players, this is kind of like your Genji, especially for like Brawl, because Brawl is pretty much just Dragon Blade, if I'm not gonna lie. He has pretty much similar tools. You then have protectors, and they're going to be like the thing they all do consistently. I've tried to keep them into the lumped category that they are within Loki itself, well, SUPERVIVE now itself. They're, in other terms, just healers, but I would not classify them as healers, because Oath is more like a tank for Overwatch players, again, basically just Reinhardt. For League players, Braum. Then you have characters that are more about moving your team around, so for example, Zeph. And I reckon as the game goes on, the definition of healer is going to be more with an asterisk, where it's going to get to more like Valorant, where we technically have healers who are more about flashing, or we technically have healers who are sometimes picked exclusively for the fact they have a wall, and that kind of thing. So yeah, this is kind of also based on prediction in trying to not get this immediately outdated. So I've stuck to these sort of catch-all terms on the basis that they miss nuance that could be reworked or could be expanded upon by just more characters existing. But yeah, as I've thrown out the terms like healers and tanks and so forth, I think it's fair to asterisk that you do not need like your typical tank DPS support trilogy. It's completely fine, and I've seen plenty of pro teams do it. I say pro teams. More just high MMR players, although some of them have been pros in other games, just have 4 DPS. That is, unironically, a completely fine comp to run. There's also... I've been in a patch once where the meta, or at least what my team was doing to be sort of near the top of leaderboards, was just triple healer, and then 1 tank, essentially doing it goats. But yeah, that's the real takeaway here. You don't need one of each in any given way, but understanding what they are means that you know how to play against them. I'm trying to keep... Yes, so Propeller Rat is just sort of simplifying my words there. Good to maintain and secure and take space. Let me just see if there's any other big problems in here. Okay, fair point from Passion Pit. Asking for raw cooldown time isn't necessarily the best question to be asking. Right, auto-attacking and ability usage. So, firstly, this game does not have auto-attacks. Your M1 is a primary fire. I like to refer to the game as a top-down hero shooter. The ability usage is more in line with games like Overwatch and Valorant, where it sort of assists your use of M1, which is probably like your main go-to tool, with some characters as an exception. I don't see any other major questions popping up in the time since. Do we have any verbal questions, or shall we move ahead?
if I can ask a question.
Sure.
Is it more like we have a primary shooter and with abilities we're supposed to augment our playstyle with?
So every character, with a few exceptions, has a range projectile, and the ones that do not have like a range projectile, as I will get to that in a moment, Ray. The characters that don't have like an M1 that is ranged will have some option that gives them a fighting chance against ranged, because ranged in itself is a valuable thing to be doing. Your cooldowns are just like, they're long enough that you're not expected to spam them. Again, I'll give that like a small asterisk. There are some characters that have gotten away with it on certain patches.
Well, Mika, I think he's asking about if projectile, do the LMBs, are they the centerpiece of character kits, or are there abilities that are more important than LMBs on some characters?
Okay,
so I would say for like Celeste, would be an example.
Celeste is a good example, yes. There are some characters where the point isn't just to be shooting at people. It's kind of, because of the size of the roster right now, I don't want to give you like too definitive an answer as to the kind of game overall it is, because it being alpha, we don't really know the full extent of how diverse it's going to get in that aspect, but most characters have an M1 that you do need to respect. For example, we have a character who probably plays the most sort of quote-unquote healer support in this game. We have like a player who is known for using that character to dunk people into the abyss. Everyone has like a chance to sort of 1v4. You can like quadra-kill clutch in pretty much any mode except I guess duos, because it's you'd have to 1v2 in that case. This doesn't mean that going for it gives a very, like, if you have hunters that heal, they can avoid their teammates to trade their healing items from others' buttons. Can you rephrase that question in a moment, and I'll get to Luke's.
Me?
No, so Propeller Rat, I'm asking if you could rephrase in the meantime, just so it's clearer, and then I'll go to Luke's question earlier from, how would you approach souls when you have two controllers and are team vibe? So, because again, team vibes is more of a confidence thing. Controllers are kind of your team identity by the fact you're running two of them. For this patch specifically, because we have disabled two controllers that were more works in progress, and I believe they're getting small reworks before they come back. Two controllers is literally the entire category right now. And I think even after that fact, just it being half of your team, you probably lean into the fact that, okay, you have a comp that's all about getting into people's faces and then telling them to back off. And I think on the basis that soul fighting in itself is like, okay, so for those who don't know, I'll just recap briefly before I address this half of the question. Soul bosses are like huge buffs that you can only get from killing a boss with 3 phases. There'll be like an initial phase where you have to kill these shields surrounding it. You'll then have to go out of the way to find these crystals that's going to throw out onto the surrounding area, and then you have to finally come back in and kill its main point. This takes so long that most teams in the circle at that time, because it spawns rather late game, probably have a chance to come stop you. Controllers then probably just have the straight up advantage of they can control the space even if they can't immediately control the outcome of an overall fight were it to end. They just kind of say, right, give us this space and then we'll decide what to do later. Of like, the other team can decide whether they respect you or not. I probably would respect most of the time, especially given how Celeste is right now. But from that kind of mentality, I think it's good for you to be saying, right, we're going to contest this, right, we're going to go for this. Especially because those characters are like, they're very feast or famine. Void is a character, he is mostly utility, so he isn't getting things like items for stats, or like various powers and so forth. His combat ability is not going to be as high as if you had run something else. So the mere fact that you're running double controller, I would say just go for things before people outscale you. Right. Moving down through chat as it moves very fast. Is there a reward for playing healer, support, / controller? Is anyone going to queue for DPS and run it down because they can't perform? So there aren't any dailies that, for example, to my knowledge, that say like go play protector or go play a controller. But firstly, this seminar is mostly on the assumption that you're going to be finding people to sort of group up with and then deciding what you're doing. But secondly, I've already mentioned once, but you can unironically run quad DPS. I have seen plenty of good squads run that, and it's not in a sense of they're literally just smurfing on everyone, even though I guess in a playtest that can be a brutal factor. It's more so just that the TTK is so low in this game that if you're on it with the neutral phase that I described, the CBT phase, if we're going to use that acronym more, you can probably just go straight in off of minor blunders, things like people need to back up to heal and that kind of thing. So it's more... I wouldn't consider too harshly like your comp needs X, Y, and Z. It's more X, Y, and Z exist, and then you decide which ones are beneficial to you. What comp do you think is best for Team Vibe? By the inherent nature of Team Vibe, I don't think there's a best comp. It's more picking your comfort and then pairing it together, if that makes sense. Whereas Team Maths is more like, here's what I currently like to do, but I would like it to be prioritizing what we want to do strategically over my individual comfort as a player.
Okay, quick question, and I feel like this will probably be helpful for anybody who hasn't played or hasn't played a lot. When we're talking about team vibes versus team maths, I guess the thing that I'm wondering is, are both teams like viable and intended to be so, or are we basically talking about team fuck around and like have fun versus team is going to win the game?
So
you know what I mean?
I get what you're trying to say. What I'm more so getting at is team vibes and team maths are more what you build the team on, and eventually you'll just be both. So eventually you'll just have like enough comfort on that play style that the team maths can be like team vibes in terms of its synergy. Or if you're already the team vibes team, you can get enough theory related to how you play, or you can introduce like enough thought process that you can make it more cohesive and make it work in that sense. And I think good teams can come from either angle. It's just like a spectrum of things.
So you're talking about the difference of like high player synergy versus high like specific game knowledge. We're not talking about like casual play whatever the fuck you want versus
we're
like
talking high level
hardcore play meta.
Can I say something really quick?
Go ahead.
I believe what he's referring to is that the game is open to experimentation and the meta is not going to be strictly enforced by like obviously things will be nerfed, but it won't be strictly enforced as in like how the developers want the game to be played is sort of what I'm reading it, because they want the experience
Well, that's
to be
sort
more,
of
like,
so that's sort of the
forward.
question.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
like
Well,
is like because
that's
like
what I
right
got.
now there's not a meta because everyone who's been playing it's been changing quite rapidly and they only can play for like what, a day every month, so like
I think
what meta?
the core
Well, I guess we'll see the
design,
meta next playtest.
the core design is probably going to be more akin to a fighting game in the long run. So fighting games, you get what other scenes would call a one trick, and that they just refer to them as mains. They have like a specific way of playing, and they're just so good at playing that thing, they stick to that thing, or they maybe stick to a couple characters more. This game being, firstly, it's a blind pick game, so for those coming from like MOBA backgrounds and stuff, you can just one trick, but also the way the game is developed, it's not like, say, in Apex, where really specific abilities do really specific things in really good ways. You have to consider the whole kit that comes with it. It's not just you strapped the best gun in the game on the guy with wall hacks, if that makes sense.
So generically, skill is a lot more measured in mechanics and, ability to literally play and control your character versus just like knowing what is correct to pick or do in a given situation.
So what is correct to do is knowledge, but it's also, it builds on what will enhance your mechanics, or what will...
Right. I mean, I was trying to... That's my fault. I was trying to say it in a way, because obviously game knowledge is literally always going to be important, and, knowing what to do next. I get that. But if we're talking about, like, League of Legends or Valorant, for example, very frequently the game and the meta has sort of evolved intentionally by the devs to be like, this objective is coming up. The correct option is to do it. It's not like, do we want to do it? It's like, no, that you need to do it, unless, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's less of decision making and more of knowing what you are intended to be doing in the moment.
I think the nature of this game being as sandboxy as it is, and yet most of your most important abilities and so forth are things you lock in at the beginning of the game. I don't think you're going to end up in a situation where, unless balance has gone horribly wrong, you won't end up with like these players can't do as good anymore because their character has been outshone by this character. It's more that the depth of the game gives you a various combination of resources, and you have to decide how you're going to mesh enough of those resources together to have something that is viable. I don't know if I'm explaining that well.
Cool. No, that's fine. That's fine. That's great.
I think
Mika, can I chime in and say something?
Sure, go ahead.
So I think one thing that most people look at and say, oh, well, Overwatch is figured out, or it is figured out on each patch and then it's changed a little bit and gets refigured out, and League is figured out, etc. The thing is, it's a battle royale where it's not a simple 4v4, it's a 4v4v4, etc. 40 different people on the map. Things will change every single time. And then there are 30 plus powers that will change how you play. Sure, you might be more comfortable with using certain powers. Sure, you might need certain powers in certain situations, but everything is kind of viable. And when you have 15 plus different character kits plus a lot of different power options, it's got so many iterations, it's not really something you can figure out as easily. There isn't ever something that's optimal, because there will be something optimal for each situation. You cannot just figure it out. You have to hope that situation pulls up, or try to force that situation to help yourself.
Yeah, so I think actually the way you phrased figuring it out is really good, because it's sparked to my mind a comparison that I had not thought of when making these slides, and that is you look at a game like chess. Chess by machines is quote-unquote figured out to a pretty good extent by this point. The skill of the game comes from being a player that has not got the memory to quote-unquote figure out every situation in the same way an engine does. And it's just doing stuff that is familiar enough to you, or has a similar enough play pattern to you. And bear in mind, you've also got other players to work with, 1 or 3 depending on the mode, where you reasonably aren't going to put enough cogs together in a fast enough time in a game where you also need to be farming. Let's not forget too much. You're not going to end up in those situations where, like in League, for example, it's just, I build this item now. Or, like, my entire build is decided before I've even entered the game. There's enough variation going on, and players can put you into even further variation of, like, okay, if you were in a tournament setting, and this has happened in show matches before, I will point out, you have, like, what I'm now phrasing as vibes teams and what I'm now phrasing as maths teams, and the vibes teams just know if we take the situation now, they have all this stuff figured out against us that they probably just win because they've done enough setup. But we can scuff their situation by doing something else that is different enough from what they could have accounted for that all the kind of main theory goes out the window. And I think some of the best innovations in this game at the moment have been people thinking creative in a way that has, like, stripped away the logical teams, or vice versa. Go on.
Could you, I would understand if you can't think of one off the top of your head, but, like, could you give a slightly more specific example?
I think I know it. 1 second.
Because, like, that's a really cool conceptually, but it is a little hard to picture if you don't know the game really well.
From mkeep.c in Newbie chat has
Charlie, we can hear you. You wanna mute?
Yeah. Please, Charlie, please mute, Mage.
I will copy a message link for those who are curious in this as something to save. This is a long sort of ramble I did back in November of a specific play from one show match that really caught the eye of the clan I played with, where people used the terrain and the fact teams were fighting at certain times so that the logic team or the maths team who had set up on these specific sort of islands to create like a moat situation didn't outright win the game when the circle went over it, because they had sort of the vibes understanding of how to get in, and they sort of played the lobby in that they sowed enough chaos over the course of this ring that they were able to punish the team that quote unquote did everything right on their end. So I've linked that in newbie chat, and I'm just gonna reply to it again specifically with that ... so people can. I know mobile likes to really like make links not obvious to read, so I've fixed that right there. Any further questions? Because we're gone.
Just one question. What's the purple and green circle? Like, what's the difference in the clip?
So green circle is, trying to think of.
It's where the circle is moving to, the green circle, and the purple circle is where it is right now.
I'm trying to think of a comparison off the top of my head, but in PUBG, I believe white circle is what that green circle is, and blue circle is what the purple circle is. And then...
Okay.
It's just the rotation to move into.
For Fortnite players, I think that's still white for inner and purple for outer. Just green is that white, that's all.
And if I may, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm speaking up too much, but
No, go ahead.
I am just curious because you mentioned, there is farming for, consumables and experience and whatnot. And that, to me, that does sound in some way sort of similar to Apex in terms of like Apex's meta developed very much of a sense of like correct rotations, where depending on your spawn, you are always going to want to like you have to figure it out, obviously, but if you're playing correctly, you have a specific spot that you are going to want to go, and then from there, a different place, and so on and so forth. So is the map, or even just the flow of the game, set up in such a way as to avoid those sort of like almost like predetermined rotation type plays, because I could very easily see that happening where like everybody knows where to go, and so for the first however long, no one runs into each other.
So that does happen, but I think there's two really kind of interesting dynamics that are present in this game, but not other games. And that is, one, the comp diversity means that in return for this predictability, we get certain comps that are only possible because that consistency is there. So, for example, there is a fortress in the southwest which has a stupid amount of gold coming out of it and a vault, so people can come out of the other side with powers, a bonfire, and there is a merchant right outside with blue armor that they can immediately buy off of with the shit ton of gold they have. There's also a place called Academy, which I think a lot of people harp on about because at one point
it's called the stats now, but yes.
It's called the stacks, yes. There was like a while where that was a little too overtuned, but now I think it's fairly reasonable. Of you have books that spawn in that area that allow you to go past the PvE XP cap on that day without actually fighting people. However, that area, rather paradoxically, becomes a bit of a tilted towers in the early game, where people specifically want that if their mid-game is a little lacking as a comp. So you get really good early game comps that get early fights to get the priority of that XP, and then they maybe fall off a bit, which is why they're going there, because they want their ultimates early. Because one of the key things about day one is you can only get to level 4 off camps, and your ultimates are on level 5. There are a bunch of scenarios I could go through like that. I've just talked about the one I really like and the one that seemingly everyone knows about thanks to that one godforsaken patch. There's a similar story for pretty much every named location, with a few exceptions, like Site 38 doesn't do anything particularly interesting per se, but other stuff does. But yeah. Any, like, go on.
Yeah, real quick basic. I keep hearing the term days. I've seen it in YouTube videos. No one explains what it is. What the fuck is that?
Okay, so day-night cycle is quite simply at certain specific times, and I believe they're on the wiki that someone faster than me can probably grab the link of if they want to. But there is a wiki that lists all the times if you need them. The basic thing you need to know is just at this given time, the visibility reduces. So daytime you can see further than you can see at nighttime, and then the following day, at that set time, all the mobs will respawn, and they will be a little higher level than they were before. And because you only get XP off of camps that are higher level than you, you basically have this soft cap whereby on this given day, your level cap is going to be this unless you go fight, because players are exempt from this level cap. So it's basically, it's sort of a comeback mechanic of if you weren't able to find people to fight instead of their loot by that point in the game, you can probably just go kill some PvE to catch up and not have, you don't have like league situations where they're like 10k up on you or something. It's going to be more like you get a little bit of advantage and then it's on you to press that advantage because it's only going to be there for a limited time.
So it's not like a scaling XP thing. It is quite literally you either get XP or you get none at all, and that's dependent on whether or not the
whether the camp is higher level than
camps.
you. Yeah.
Sure, whether or not the camp is a higher level than you.
So if you're level 3 and the camp's level 4, you can get to level 4. But once you hit level 4, the camp is not going to give you any more XP because it's now the same level as you.
Right. Are there clear demarcations to say this camp is level 3?
It would be right next to their health bar, like actual players
just like
themselves.
a player.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Right. I think we've sort of exhausted that then, which brings me to the next bit of the composition. And it's good we've had that level of detail over it, actually, because I think you understand now that there is a lot more decision making into the characters you pick and why than what I'm now going to show you, which is probably going to put that into a little more context. So the first bit is the equipment in the game, and the thing with the equipment is they all have like a bunch of terminology on them. So tech blade or bladed helm or mana blade. I could read left to right. They're on your screen now. The things you really need to know is just tech means CDR, mana means mana regen, obviously. Helmet is health.
And max mana.
And max mana. Vampiric just means omnivamp. If it has anything to do with a blade, then that's AP. And then you just sort of break down the names based on the things they say off of that. Now, the main thing to note is, because these are going to be in limited quantities, which is primarily going to be from PvE, and you're going to be trying to level these up as well, rather than just equipping the same gear over and over. You ideally want to split so that you have one player that says, I don't know what specifically I'm going to get, but I need the CDR. And then you have another player that's like, I need the mana regen. You have another player that's like, I'm going to be the carry, so I need AP. And then it's like, you could maybe have a tank, for example, that's like, I need HP. Or you can be more ballsy than that and be like, okay, we're all going to get similar stuff, but understand that you're going to have trade-offs in how well you snowball, because you're all vying for the same kind of loot. In duos, just by the inherent nature of the loot pool, is the same amount of item diversity, but you have less players. You can go up to 1 slot, or 2 stats on the same person, like the same item. So you could be like, for example, my main in duos is Zeph, and Zeph has mostly utility in his mobility, which is just kind of cooldown scaling, but he burns through mana hella quick. So I could be like, I want the CDR and the mana set to keep up the CDR demands. He also has healing, which you kind of spam in a lot of the time. So it's like, give me CDR and mana regen, and I'm good. And then my partner who plays Void a lot would probably be like, I need HP so I don't immediately die. And then I just need movement speed because my character is slow as hell. And then you can sort of work off that, where it's like, okay, so they want Bladed Helm, Quick Blade, and Bladed Helm also gives them the health, so you kind of deal with both at once. But then they could also be like, okay, I'm swapping the Quick Blade because I know that this lobby is very assassin heavy, for example, so I'm going to swap it out for like more HP, so that could be a tech helm or something.
So the screen is mildly confusing to me. Are you saying that generally as a strategy, one person should attempt to like pick a stat and stack it as much as possible?
Essentially.
Or are you saying like you should like cover your bases first?
I'm essentially saying if you want to optimize the loot pool, you want as many things in those loot pool to be quote unquote helpful, and therefore it's like, okay.
Oh, the loot pool changes based on what you're currently holding?
The loot pool doesn't change, but if, for example, I'm running a comp that has like no major assassin going into it, then it's like I have no use for Omnivamp because no one's going to be dancing with death that much. Or it's a comp where it's like full dive and there's no like actual tank. It's like no one has a need for specifically building max health. You want to kind of understand whether like you're going to play to optimize these stats or whether you're going to play for something else, which is why I'm very glad we had a lot of those questions come in regarding like specific nuances of why you pick things, because I don't want this to be like, okay, you whip out a spreadsheet and then you only build off of this. I want it to be more just, I've introduced those things to you, and now it's like, this is the next layer of considerations that you want on top of
People
this.
are talking in the chat about leveling up your items. Items level up?
Okay. Mika, can I take a step in for this
sure.
one? So you get 2 item spots. You drop with a default half AP, half health item that's pretty poor. And so you pick up, normally you'll get a level 1 version of the item.
Are these the referenced boots and not boots?
Yes. Boots,
If
quick
you've seen
play.
the Nidhogg video, he calls them boots and not boots.
Okay,
Yes,
so boots
yes,
gets a
yes.
dedicated slot, and the 2 other slots are for anything that isn't boots, if that makes sense.
My understanding was that there was armor, and then there was
armor,
a boot slot, and then there was not boot slot.
Armor gets
I could
a
be
dedicated
wrong,
slot,
obviously.
but we don't refer to it as equipment because you don't upgrade armor from equipping more armor, if that makes sense. You don't stack duplicates with armor.
It's the duplicate mechanic where if you gain multiple of the same item, it becomes a higher rarity of that item. There we go. So, sorry, that makes more sense. Gotcha.
Yeah. So this is why you want to optimize, because you want people to be stacking the same item on themselves, not fighting between each other as to stacking that item.
Okay, so it's less about necessarily stats as more
getting to full build on the things you're arguing over, or rather not arguing
right
over,
it's more about not overlapping as opposed to only focusing on one specific stat.
You want to not overlap, or at least have this discussion now, so that you're not having arguments mid-game, if that makes sense.
No, totally, absolutely does.
But
it's still not necessarily negative to whoever just joined. Someone is yelling at you. It sounds like your mother.
It's Rail Layton. There you go.
Okay. Right. So
cool.
That takes us to next point, which is going to be formation overview.
Wait, Mika.
Go on.
Can I hit one more point?
Sure.
So equipment, when you level it up, on the damage ones, you get plus 10 AP. So it's roughly a 7% increase. And so the difference between max level and not max level is about 50 AP, which is something, but it's not like the end of the world. You're not going to be just out stat checked because somebody has better equipment.
Yeah.
Like
okay.
they're
for
going to build...
for the league players in chat, AP refers to all abilities. There's not like a difference between magic and physical.
Correct. AP is just the universal damage stat. Everyone has different.
Does that
scaling...
affect your default?
All forms of damage.
Yes.
Unless
okay, so it affects literally all of your buttons.
So literally all of your buttons. Yes.
Does it affect? Does it affect consumables or your powers?
No, because they're not the hunter. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It's just I just felt like that. I could see it working that way, possibly.
That's fair. But yeah, I was kind of mainly. Go on.
I'm sorry. Go. No. You're okay. Go ahead.
I was bringing in this slide to be like, this is the next sort of layer, and I think sort of going forward.
Can I ask a question before that?
Go on.
So each player only has 2 slots, one for boots and one for each of this.
So you have 2 slots that are not your boots, and boots gets an entire dedicated slot on the basis that so it used to be just a helmet, a chest plate, and a boot slot. They eventually made it so the helmet and the chest plate slots are 2 slots that you can just mix, because that was more freeing in terms of the game design. As a result of this, we just have 2 slots that are anything but boots, and then there's a boot specific slot that you kind of just upgrade as you go.
And it's for each player?
For each player, yes.
Thanks.
No worries. Okay. So this next slide is going to be sort of used as a visualizer, but I wouldn't stick too rigidly to this mid-fight. Fights can kind of flow around this. But this is just your sort of quick cheat sheet that you can kind of be like, here's the people that stand directly behind tanks, ready to bonk people that get too close. Being like, so those characters are Brawl, Felix, and Bishop. We currently only have like 2 real quote-unquote tanks, and they're kind of soft tanks, where one is actually a healer, but he happens to have a Reinhardt shield. No, that does not make him Brigitte though. You don't have to worry.
It is
Better
Brigitte.
fucking not make him fucking spaghetti. Fuck that character. Don't ruin a different game. Stay in your own game. You ruined it, and now you have to live with it. Stay.
And then
Sorry.
No. And then Kingpin, again for the Overwatch analogy, he's your sort of Roadhog for League players. That's like Blitzcrank. For Dota players, Pudge, the classic hook character essentially. He's going to be wanting to be up front just because he has like a pretty raw HP pool. I will note that unlike a lot of MOBAs, for example, because I know most people familiar with like the main concepts are probably going to be coming from MOBA, you do still need to use cover in this game. It's not like you can stand there indefinitely. Left mouse button can be physically blocked by terrain for all but like a few characters, and those few characters are kind of have it as their gimmick passive. They're specifically designed around the fact that it's like, oh, I shoot through walls for this specific thing. Then you'll notice for those who are more sort of acutely aware of the roster, both controllers are in the midline, as I'm going to refer to it. And that's essentially because the midline is just the equidistance between backline and front. It's the people who need to tend to anything that needs attention in terms of just sort of either jumping on a target that's in turn jumped on someone else, or just moving something. One of those has a physical teleport. Keeping something away, that would be Celeste's area because she has a wall that can push people back, so on and so forth. And then beyond that, you've got 2 further backlines of soft backline, where I consider Aluna and Ghost, and then Jewel to some extent, but that's more to do with her Mark, because she's one of the harbingers I mentioned. They're all kind of backline until they're not, until they have an opportunity, which is a reason to then come to the front line. But they don't have anything to do there by default. And then your hard backlines are sort of Huntress, who is like, sorry, she's a myth now. Or the names were code names until very recently. Myth is a classic archer, except she also has like a walking through walls thing, but that's just like, it's a minor part of the kit. Well, not minor in gameplay outcome, but it's not the main reason you're picking her. Her main thing is just she's going to be shooting from distance. Shrike, who thankfully has had the same...
Let's go, guys!
Shrike, thankfully, has kept the same name throughout development, which makes it easier for me. She's just a long-range sniper. You can kind of think of her as an AWP as a character, if I were to summarize it. She has a passive on if she gets a hit on someone and she follows it up basically within her next shot, she will probably just kill you because she does so much bonus damage. And then Zeph, very backline, just on the basis that he needs to keep out of a fight where possible. His sort of 1v1 ability is probably the lowest in the game. Aluna has more going on despite being a quote-unquote backline healer, so I won't really give her that in full. But he has no reason to be anywhere near enemy, but he does have reason to, because he's a healer and he can move people with like his dash ability. He takes people with him on his dash ability, and his ultimate goes far enough that it doesn't really matter how far away he is from the fight. It's not global or anything, but for 95-ish% of combat scenarios, he's going to be within range, no matter what you really do. I've covered that sort of in detail verbally, but what we're getting to here is this, in that your front and back lines are more akin to like radiuses from whatever your front line is. And this is so that you can rotate it so that if you're familiar with League, this is pretty much front to back. But you want to be rotating your back line when it's being chased and keeping your front line sort of in the middle. So you're playing piggy in the middle in reverse, essentially, of you want at all times a big shotgun dude or big hammer dude standing in the way of any combat. And if you don't have a direct tank like Kingpin and Oath, the same goes from the next line behind it. If you don't even have any of those, if you're running something really specific, then you just keep going back, essentially. There are orders of priority in terms of getting value. So in order to get into the CBT that I was discussing earlier, you kind of need your front line to be facing their front line and then their back lines to be behind each other. There are some scenarios where you can still kind of CBT with an unorthodox addition to that nuance, but for sake of simplicity, we'll stick to kind of that, where you want kind of two teams pointing into each other, and then if you're an assassin, your goal is to get past that front line. If you're a protector, chances are you're probably reinforcing your front and back lines, depending on where you already are. Controllers are space creators, so they will push the front line back and hopefully the back line behind it. Every main role will kind of interface with everything in this dynamic, and then duelists are in turn the people who are just going to get sheer value out of playing this formation. In that Kingpin's going to be going for hooks, Myth's going to be shooting arrows into people, and Ghost's going to be there with kind of his main damage dealing. He's just kind of, I can't describe his style in any special way because, to be honest, he's just a raw DPS character. Again, using the Overwatch analogy, he'd be like Soldier 76. You just kind of hold M1 into people, which feels sad to say because he has a lot more going on than that, but that's really the basic gist. Right, so I have done a lot of talking at you for quite a while now. So what we're going to do is credit to a friend of mine called Kurbee in this one. We're going to use the examples I've just given you in an actual sort of real, this was what we call a show match from before. It was quite a few months back, but that's just because we take a while to annotate these things that we decide they're worth looking at. Before we... yes, I can't hit escape in this, can I? Because it's a video. 1 second. From current side. Keep that open and just read chat before I start the video.
Now my stream is down.
Right. Why is that?
Because I'm streaming your stream.
Because when I hit escape, it auto closes. Right. Thank you, PowerPoint. Very cool. I need to find another application for this, but this was just the easiest of 5-minute job. I'm going to see if there's any nuance questions in chat of revs. My volume is muted, but I hope this... Yep. OBS is still going. Yes, I believe it's still going. Yes, it is. Okay. Thanks, camera. I've tried to, like, keep things flowing where I can. Right. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to play this once in full, and then if people have any immediate questions, we go back in bit by bit. I've picked this clip because it's probably the best example straight up of the concept within the limited show matches we have where everything's fully casted. And we're essentially going to be looking at the way that you will notice that Lino, the myth player, is currently stood at the back of the end of another fight. So this backline is currently here, and then Fifi's in a bush, but I assure you that's a frontline tank when it pops out of that. And they're going to slowly reposition this onto the high ground next to the heart, which you can see on the minimap. Has been named for those who aren't familiar with the map, because they know this other team is just coming in. They have a vague idea this team is here. They know it's going to be from the east, they just don't know if they're going to go up top or if they're going to come round and flank. So the Felix will sort of deal with that. That's the context you need for now, and I'll just play it in full.
They're not going to prove too much of a threat. Light blue might, however, Blix time, hot biscuit. They are. I mean, ooh, do Forest? Do they know? Well, they do know now. They know now.
Oh, huge stun!
And in goes Nico with the Firefox. It's a huge stun. Chipser moves through. There goes the Quake down from the Oathbreaker. Chipser caught out, trying to move away with that flex. Ooh, manages to get up onto the out of the chasm. But the spike from Line Pro, I believe that was Forest Green.
Right. So, any immediate questions of things not caught in that moment before I do any dialogue?
Replay it again, would you mind?
Sure. I'll give it one.
They're not going to prove too much of a threat. Light blue might, however, Blix time, hot biscuit. They are. I mean, ooh, do Forest? Do they know? Well, they do know now. They know now.
Oh, huge stun!
And in goes Nico with the Firefox. It's a huge stun. Chipser moves through. There goes the Quake down from the Oathbreaker. Chipser caught out, trying to move away with that flex. Ooh, manages to get up onto the out of the chasm. But the spike from Line Pro, I believe that was Forest Green.
Right. Just double checking any major. Okay. So we're going to now run through that bit by bit of, I'm going to go through the timestamps and establish. So Fifi is going to slowly, if you watch the Oath player, ignoring the Felix, who can play fairly close to frontline anyway, he's sort of soft frontline, as I tried to sort of diagram explain. He's going to play this little off position, which isn't the main front line. The main front line is where Fifi is currently standing. But he's going to play near enough to it because he's going to hold his additional sort of advantage in that his flamethrower is really good for spiking. So this is sort of a situational thing. And then you'll notice that Chipser, who is playing his sort of assassin role, is trying to find his flank angle to get into this back line. And then this is the point of action where we're playing the basic CBT loop. The Kingpin is going for his hook. That's his big button. And if he gets value here, then that's already a huge advantage because the reaction, though we don't see it, they're prepared to group up. So they've fallen back a little bit because of this hook goes through. He's essentially going to get a kill, for lack of a better. If I went into more nuance, there's more like ifs and buts to it, but the main thing you need to know at the sort of level of the room we're dealing with is that means kill. He's not going to get that, so it's a major cooldown from this point on. And immediately, Felix is going to start preparing a dive because, oh shit, they burnt hook. We're going to see this projectile come in. This is kind of supporting space for that dive. So that's going to be sort of a major investment. This is why I also consider Ghost to be a duelist, in that he loves this scenario just as much as Kingpin does. His major thing is just sort of sit back and shoot, and then he can come into the front line when he wants to laser people who might be low on health and need finishing off with, say, a grenade. We're going to see, as the annotation explains, assassin flank angle come straight in. This stun is going to be a key fight opportunity. So this cooldown has got its value. We're then going to see essentially two dives play out. So this is again the trade I'm talking, where sort of button for button, there's been a dive and another dive, and they've sort of cancelled each other out. However, you'll sort of see here in a moment. I'll let it play out just a little bit. So, because they take so long here, Aluna has time to pop this ultimate. So for those who aren't aware, Aluna's ultimate is an AoE. This is going to start dealing some sort of control damage. And then you'll see that because that's come down, Fifi is then throwing his ult because he's trying to trade, again, button for button. He wants to hold this space. They're going to concede it, but they don't want this team pushing in immediately. So they've thrown this sort of defensive, I forget, it's not Earth Shatter anymore because they don't want their asses sued off. I forget what it's called now, but basically Ophult. They then come in onto the diver because essentially this fight ends if they don't deal with this diver right now, because again, trade for trade, you can't let this Felix go down and then have no response, which is ultimately what's going to end this fight because Chipsa gets out here. We're again going to see this move here. So Shiv just has like a little dash ability that's tied to, I believe it's like a knife thing. Someone will be able to record the ability name, that's not me. So she gets out. The front line has been in shambles because this whole time they moved this front line here, which is again the circle. Do I have the ability to draw? I think I do, yes. So front line was here, and then this was here. And the back line, what it did was rotate. So again, we've got like the little diagram I showed you before of front lines and backs, and it rotated around this. So they kind of did 2 pivot points. You can sort of do either or. You can either move the front or you can move the back. But yeah, that's what you need to know. Now, do I have an eraser tool? I do have that. Cool. I would be very annoyed if I hadn't checked that and then it turned out. Right, turn back on the laser. This does not give me the video tool back. This does not also give me the... We'll work it out. We'll work it out on the fly. Point of doing this live. Do I have access to... I do not have access to... I can't click escape either. Do I just turn it? I turn it off. Okay, that's why. Right. So, sorry about that. Go back to where we were. We were here, weren't we? So, this rotation happens to try and salvage the situation best they can. The only real quote-unquote mistake here, I think, was just they didn't catch this dive that it was happening soon enough. It was coming straight out of that bush, just north of the ult, the Aluna ult, and then in turn the O4, but that little bush right there. And then they come rotate onto this, and then you will see this formation still sort of maintained. But yeah, if I go back into playing the fight again.
Chipsa moves through. There goes the quake down from the Oathbreaker.
I do not get... Okay. Sorry, I'm learning the tools on the fly, but... This one escape, essentially, determines the entire outcome of the fight. Because had this not happened, you would now be in a 3v3. And if anything, I think Green's 3v3 here is better. Because they have 2 duelist style roles, and they still have a tank. Whereas what they would have lost would be the Shiv, and then what you have remaining is just like Kingpin, healer. You have one sort of good counter response, I guess, but you have the better neutral because you have a duelist heavy comp. So yeah, you'll see here, this disengage. Again, this disengage is to do with the fact that they had already won this fight, just for context. I believe it's annotated here. But just before this clip began, they already had this whole area. So yeah, I hope that's a decent visualizer as to the whole concept, and we can sort of play it again from Blue's POV even. So they've came up, so they have their, if I do the lines again, now that I know how to turn it off on, they have sort of this layout, and again, it's the rings. So with the exception of Hot Biscuit, who's reacting to a specific situation over the abyss, you've got the assassin breaking off, gonna go here, but they've essentially established this ring's gonna be going on to face into the high ground, because they assume this team's just gonna take high ground, which, to be fairness, they already are trying to. What you'll actually kind of see is, if I clear over, from the result of that, if we then play it forward just a little bit, they've sort of kept the front line into this situation, and then the front line backs up, it's lost space to that lack of cooldown. But you'll see even when they're preparing the dive to come in from the Shiv, you've still got the same ring of radius relative to like the main frontliner for all of their pieces. And then I'll keep playing it out. I should clear the screen first. You've seen the endless fight a few times, you kind of know how it goes, but like, yeah. So we get to here. Kingpin's still finishing the Wisp, so they're not quite ready to re-engage anyway. And Chips was backing off too, so obviously they're not setting up another fight immediately, or another engagement immediately, but they'll get out from here. Or other Green will get out, and then even in this position, with the exception of Aluna was slightly out because she had just gone for this spike. Like, she's responsible for this, that's the only reason she's not in the default, but everyone else already kind of understands maintaining this distance. And the relative distance changes a bit because they're more grouped up, but the same kind of distance is still applicable. Wrong button. Again, still wrong button. Yeah. Do you have readability issues with characters and their silhouettes? Trying to see if I'm projecting or not. I do, but I also kind of don't outside of fight. I think it could be... Yeah, the readability issue for me is not necessarily silhouette, it's just how, like, from the spectator POV, things turn things invisible quite a lot, and then also, like, just in general, a lot of characters have a similar walking pattern, which I think is more down to animation than it is silhouette, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily raw art team, and I think it's got better over time.
Yeah, maybe this is not... Maybe I'm making this into more of an issue than it actually is, but just like watching YouTube videos, and I understand the clip you just showed was zoomed out for spectator view, so but like I've watched, you know, YouTube videos about the game, and I am literally just like, who the fuck is anybody? And it's not because like I don't know the characters, like I don't know all the characters in Dota 2. In fact, I know like 3 of them. But if I'm watching Dota 2, I can at least very quickly be like, okay, big guy over there, and then little fucking munchkin dude over here, and then like mage asshole, like, and I can very clearly tell, like, you know, where they are and roughly what they're doing, even if I don't have any more details than that. This one, with all of the like with all of the aiming reticles, the very big effects, the bullets, and then also like the HP bars seem really big comparatively to the characters. I'm frequently just like, who is underneath this HP bar?
Yeah, so that's pretty fair.
That's so true.
And I would say it's also, I've been ragging on this for a while, but the character design among specifically the femme portion of the roster is considerably more ambiguous than the mask portion of the roster, where we have, like, I think they de-non-binary Dove, like they de-non-binary Void, but I can't quite remember. Yeah, Anyon is well aware, because I think you either made a thread, or, wait, there was 2 threads, wasn't there? There was one on, like, using primarily Myth as an example, and then there was another thread of just in general. There is an option to hide usernames, which changes all the usernames into character names, and I do recommend it for beginners, because possibly...
That's not bad, yeah.
Yeah. I would probably stick to it until, like, you just know from muscle memory, which I think takes a while. Well, not muscle memory, you know what I mean, like pattern recognition. Now, anyway, I put this diagram up, and we sort of saw from the analogy before where, like, a hook missing, they respected and backed up within the formation, but don't in yourself break the formation to try and go for an opportunity such as a hook, because it will backfire, and there's, like, a lot of good clips that you can probably see of people getting punished for that, but just as a general rule, you can try and maintain your front line and back line in terms of keeping it level with their front line and back line. Because once it breaks, once the whole formation breaks, it's the matter of who was already ahead. Sort of like when you get to chess endgame of whoever's up on material. But yeah, with that said, I think I've got to most stuff. One more mentality thing I want to cover. You probably get a grasp of, there was a lot of that, and it can be hard to keep track of, which is why you want to split fight stuff like that and IGL stuff for, you can kind of think of this as micro and macro. I wouldn't solely put it down to that, but you want someone who's more in tune to immediately after the sort of mental taxation of all the shot calling. Someone who can say, right, fight's over, now we do this. So I've got sort of main description now on your thread. Given I can probably just release this after as like a recording, I'm gonna just sort of leave you that there, because that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, the support and the jungler.
Are these slides, are you gonna post them somewhere or not?
I'm gonna post the OBS recording minimum. I'm probably going to, in addition, give the raw slides, because I think that will probably help. So yeah, it will be available later. Anyway, I'll go into the summary now of, we've covered a lot of ground, and if you have, like, if you're the kind of person who needs a memory of, like, you need the conversation topics reminded of, but you'll remember the nuance within it, this is sort of your moment now to either screenshot this or come back to this or what have you. Just things to bring up the friend group, really. And yeah, that's sort of my end slide. I will stick around for questions, but I appreciate there was, like, some sort of rough production stuff, but that was, for a pilot, I wouldn't say bad. You can all tell me how that went sort of in your heads, or like your opinion of it, and do be honest, because if I am going to be doing more of this, that in itself is feedback. I'd like to sort of know where I was struggling in getting things across to you. But yeah, whilst chat's rolling, I'll roll to questions.
Well, it's my opinion. You did decently well, I think. I think you just needed a lot more time to prepare.
Yeah. If I'm blunt, there is other stuff happening that I'm doing for the SUPERVIVE community that isn't this. Speaking thereof, shoutouts to Law. So I'll get a link probably in newbie chat, since I think most of you all came from there after the fact, but I'm helping with some logistics for a tournament next month, not this month, but if any of you want to give that a try. But yeah, have you already got a referral? Oh, I see, that's 2 chat. But yeah, thank you, and I will stop the recording, but I am doing questions, and if there's anything that then starts